Good evening and welcome to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network. I'm your host, Gary Morgan. With me, as always, is my brother from another mother and regionally renowned pizza connoisseur, Jim Stamm. Jim, how you doing, brother?
Yeah, man, I'm doing good. I had some Rockaway pizza last night, and that was at my birthday dinner, and it's pretty highly regarded around these parts, and it's a really good New York style pizza. So, little off the beaten path, but
you know what's hilarious is you told me it was your birthday yesterday. You're like, yeah, I got Ben down at Dave and Buster's for my birthday, and nothing ever crossed my mind about wishing you a happy birthday. So,
well,
happy birthday. And,
thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. As you know, at our age, when we start pushing certain numbers, we just want to ignore it altogether. So that's kind of what I did yesterday.
That's totally how I handle it. So, I mean, bro, it's been a rough week after rough week, which I suppose adds up to a rough season. Turns out expecting it to be bad didn't help at all. I mean, it still has sucked. We're going to start with low-hanging fruit. I'm embarrassed to pick it.
Well, yeah, Gary, I think it's like being told, like, if you're going to jump out of a moving car, it's going to hurt. And yes. You fully know that, and you're fully aware of it. And then you actually jump out of a moving car, and guess what? It really, really hurts, and you still talk about it. So
absolutely.
Go ahead.
But we're not going to have like an official call your shot this week, because most of what we got was basically blankety blank blank blank. Why is Josh Van Meter still on this team? Blankety blank blank blank. And I'm not going to read all those, but we are going to carpet bomb answer a whole bunch of them, because that's exactly what we're going to start with. Low-hanging fruit, Josh Van Meter. My dude, I can't even anymore. I'm to the point where I barely even try to offer any semblance of an explanation to why this guy is on the team. He can't help but soil the bed in the 5 or 6 shots he gets every week to do anything. How can you ask players to be accountable when you knowingly refuse to stop rostering someone who can't even play a ground ball?
A lot of things that he seems to struggle doing. I remember, do you remember, I mean, this is like a couple weeks ago, but Gary, he tried to turn a double play from second base, and he did one of those backhand tosses to O'Neal Cruz at second.
And that lanky son bitch couldn't reach it.
And he was 14 miles away from second base when he did it. I'm like, anyways, you know, I've actually tried to, look, it's fair. People are complaining because it's ridiculous at this point. And every time he's in the lineup, and I kind of I like to tweet a few things out about the lineup when I see it every day, just trying to bring some things out that, you know, people may or may not be aware of. If I see him in there, I just ignore it. I don't even, I've almost blocked it out of my conscious, you know, so.
Well, that's kind of the point. What more is there to say? I mean, like, what are we doing here?
You know, it's funny. I've looked at, I went and I looked at his numbers, not that I had to confirm anything, but I just thought, you know what, let me just see how ridiculously bad they are. And, you know, you're talking a guy that's almost had 200 plate appearances. And, I mean, he's hitting in the 180. I mean, 200 plate appearances, we're talking like a third of a season of at-bats and playing time. OPS in the mid 500s, hitting 180. You start putting that with Yoshi. Now you're talking 400 at bats. They've played these guys at first base in the major leagues for most of this season, and his numbers are worse.
Yeah.
So it goes back to what you're saying, which is you're trying to preach accountability and rewarding players. That's the exact opposite. At a huge position of where you need some offense.
I mean, you've got a kid on the team right now, Michael Chavis, who I think has handled first base really capably. He didn't come into this season as a first baseman, but right now, looking at him, watching him play, I'd have to say he's a first baseman. He plays it pretty well. He's definitely got the footwork down. He certainly makes the most of whatever frame God gave him, which isn't much.
Right.
And, I don't fault him for that at all. I think he's doing the best he can to fill that role. He mashes left-handed pitching. They haven't given him very much opportunity to hit right-handed pitching. But I can't imagine that he's any worse than the options that they've had to face right-handed pitching.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you just be better off letting Michael Chavis play every day, see what him settling in might provide you?
Yeah, almost just saying, hey, buddy, we're just going to let you play there the rest of the year, lefty, righty. Don't worry about it. Just go out there. And, because every time you're given one of these other guys a plate appearances, you're taking away from Michael Chavis and you're taking away from Bly Madris, and you've got them sitting there. And sitting there in a year like this is silliness. You should be at least seeing it through. See it through the whole way.
I hate to complain so much about a player that, we're talking literally. It's not an exaggeration on my part. This is a guy that's getting 5 or 6 at bats a week. Now
he is.
Earlier he was playing more than that.
Yeah.
But since he came back from the IL, he's pretty much playing 5 or 6 games, at bats a week. He's not getting much.
Right.
It's not like he's the reason they stink entirely. If that's the only at bats they have to give him, I guess maybe that would be the only justification I can think of for why you wouldn't swap him for a younger kid, because you want them to be getting at bats. But I just as an example, the other day when he made those 2 consecutive errors, you're trying to get Mitch Keller right. Yeah. You're trying to let him convince himself that he's a good pitcher. And that's what you put out there behind him. I guess all I can say is, A, is that fair to Mitch Keller, even on that one outing? And B, does it matter that you're not getting at bats? Bring up Hoy Park. We don't care about him either. But
yeah. I mean, both of them are disposable at this point. I'd rather see a younger guy that's in our system get some of those at bats. I mean, we talked about Diego Castillo the last show. Like, why wouldn't he be getting some of those at bats? And the other thing I was going to say is, like, look, every team. And I assume this is like this everywhere. Every team has a punching bag, right? Like Jack Johnson with the Penguins. I mean, he was a punching bag. And Ryan Switzer became a punching bag with the Steelers. I mean, so like there is a guy that's going to take on the brunt of that. But Josh Van Meter, I mean, his play's been so bad. How could you avoid him not being that punching bag?
All right, you cut Josh Van Meter, your new punching bag is Greg Allen. You cut Greg Allen, your new one's Eric Stout. There's always going to be a worst player on the team. I think we all can get behind that. Everybody understands that. That doesn't mean that you want to teach a group of young players that's okay.
Right.
You don't want to teach them that keeps you in a roster spot. You want to teach them that you go down when you play that badly. You don't, and I suggested the other night they ought to pulled him out right when they pulled Keller just to prove a point. Like, we're going to take you out, Mitch, but here's why. We're going to go ahead and grab Van Meter too.
Yeah.
It was just ridiculous.
Yeah, well, and the thing is too, like, if this were a situation where you felt like there was this overly coaching and demanding that players be perfect, and therefore you don't want them to play tight and feeling like that's not this. I mean, this is one of those situations where you're not performing, there has to be a bare minimum standard of what you're allowing to go step out on that baseball field, I would think.
Yeah. I mean, as long as we're talking about accountability, let's take a quick break and come back. Let's apply that to some other areas of the team, like maybe the coaching staff. All right, and welcome back to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports. Jim Gary with you. And Jim, I think we got to talk about something that I've tried to avoid for most of the season because I really kind of didn't feel like it was fair before now. But I see no way that this team can return with the same staff next year.
And you mean coaching, not pitching.
I mean coaching. I want to spend some time talking about that because I can't wrap my head around returning everyone and claiming there's any semblance of accountability. You know that I've been pretty confident that Shelton would return, and I felt pretty good that Marin would probably return, and I've kind of kept it to Haynes, but I think we need to have a bigger conversation because when you set out on a rebuild and you have 3 straight seasons that pretty much add up to 100 losses, you don't get to have a safe feeling. We railed on Shelton for saying that last week, but maybe they really do need to look at it because, yeah, he's being told what to do behind the scenes, but I don't think he's handling well the few things that are in his charge. And overall, I don't think anybody should be safe from scrutiny here. So who would you go after first? Is there anybody that you feel should be safe? And I think we can take this as far as even talking about player development. If you want to talk about somebody like John Baker, I'm okay with that. If you think Ben Cherington needs to have a better assistant than Steve Sanders, hey, I mean, we need to do something here.
It would be really, really disappointing, disheartening even, I think, if the season comes and goes and we're in the off season and there's nothing that's going on in that department. Because, for me, I really do think players sit back and they're watching this stuff. They want to see how this stuff is handled. If they're going to be held to some standards, you don't think that they sit there and think that should extend to people above them that are the ones trying to dictate how they're doing things. Right. That I really think you send a bad message. Forget the fans, and I say that because baseball tends to forget the fans, and definitely here in Pittsburgh. But let's keep it within that locker room. You take a guy like Andy Haynes as the hitting coach. I mean, they've gotten worse. Strikeouts are up. Runs per game are down. I can't imagine that guy's got a lot of I don't want to say respect, but players know what's going on. They know things aren't working. They know how bad they're struggling.
Let's throw some numbers out for hitting. In 2021, the teams were striking out 8.2 times per 9 innings. Now they're striking out 9.26 times. I mean, you can go down the list. On base percentage, 287.
My goodness.
And it was 309 last year. Average 220, 236. Last year. It's brutal.
First of all, this isn't This
There's
isn't your
no offensive
grandfather's.
category that has improved except for home runs.
Yeah. And like, the numbers are down. Those kind of numbers are down all the way around baseball, or up if you're talking about Ks for hitters. But so this isn't our grandfather's game. But you're pointing to specific measurables with the team that should be better on that side of the ball than they were last year. The only thing they've accomplished is hitting a few more home runs.
And they've and that home run figure is largely blown up by Jack Sawinski and Diego Castillo, where 24 home runs are not on the team anymore. They sent them to AAA. And it's like, okay, so you finally found something they're actually doing well, and we shipped them off. It's really hard for me to get behind Andy Haynes when I look at numbers like that. Because, yes, you're right. The entire league is kind of down in both of those categories. Well, the Pirates were dead last in one of those categories last year. They're 29th this year. It's not as though it's changed anything as far as where they rank. It's pretty bad. There's things that they could clean up there, but the strikeouts and the average dip, they didn't hit that many more home runs that it's worth it.
Well, that's the point, right? Like if you were seeing like crazy numbers as far as the home runs go, and you would say, well, you know what? It's a home run game now, and we'll take the trade-off. But what are they? Maybe 20 home runs ahead of last year's pace? Something? I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me.
They're 4 short of last year, period.
Okay. But that,
so, figure it out. Because, again, 2 of their biggest home run hitters aren't here.
Yeah.
So they're going to beat that record, but...
And with 30-some games left.
Yeah.
So nothing to the point where you say, heck, yeah, we'll take that trade-off. I mean...
Right. It's just a sad state of affairs. And I guess the reason that I think it's so alarming this year is because last year when you looked at the parts and pieces they had, you weren't playing Kai Tom for fun. You were playing Kai Tom because there was nobody else you could call up.
Yeah.
Well, this year they had 7 guys they could call up.
Right.
This year they've called up some of those guys. They've brought them to the majors. O'Neal Cruz has gotten here. Diego Castillo got here. Jack Sawinski got here. I mean, like, you can go down the list. You guys all watched this season. You know who came up here. They've had options. They've had real players come up here. And somehow these numbers have actually gotten worse as a team.
Yeah.
And there's no excuse for that. And if your excuse is, well, they had Yoshi Susugo on the team for all that time, and they had Josh Van Meter. Well, who the hell's fault is that?
Yeah, especially I can give them Yoshi in the sense of what they were trying to do. The Van Meter one, they should have known from the beginning, pretty much.
Yeah.
You mentioned it was Will Lawton, I think. Did you not? Isn't he like the director of baseball
I talked
operations?
About John Baker.
Oh, is that who it was? Okay. Yeah. Well, I was thinking there's so many guys, and Will Lawton's one of them too. He's the director of baseball operations and pro scouting. You've got the assistant general manager, Graves.
Graves.
You've got Steve Sanders. You've got him as the assistant general manager. You've got a lot of guys that you would think at some point, because Cherington's not going anywhere.
Yeah, I don't think he will, but I think his backside should start feeling a little warm.
I don't disagree with that. I just think that you will see some sacrificial lambs go, obviously, before anybody of any real substance goes.
Sure, but wouldn't Shelton be one of those sacrificial lambs? Potentially. I mean, he's going into a lame duck season, which teams don't like to do anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I know they already said he's coming back, but I'll remind people that the team said Clint Hurdle was coming back too.
Yeah.
I say that specifically because it's hard enough being a baseball coach. It's really hard being a lame duck baseball coach. Because you're talking to guys about, hey, we're going to do this with you. And you eventually get to a point somewhere around June, July, where you're starting to talk about what your plans are for that player heading into next season. And then the elephant in the room starts to make itself apparent. Oh, you're not even signed for next year, coach. What do
going back to that, players looking at each other, and when a guy leaves the room, looking at each other like,
yeah. And usually, if your coach
dude even safe?
If your coach hasn't earned his extension by the time he's going to be a lame duck, chances are he's going to be out on his ear.
It's really tough with Shelton too, because this is what I will say. They bring him in. The stench of losing is starting to stick a little bit. When you walk in the Subway and your clothes smell like Subway 4 days later,
yes,
you can't get it out. There's some of that going to go on if it hasn't already. But then Gary, I asked the question. The bigger question is who else are you going to get but another Derek Shelton to come in here next year if there's no?
Oh, I'm not going to give him the Mike Tomlin excuse.
Well, the reason I say that, Gary, is because who in their right mind would take it?
Lots of people, when they look at the talent in the farm system,
would
think they can fix it. And they'll get a Bobby Valentine or some numbskull like that if they want to.
Well, yeah, but that's kind of my point. Like, anybody worth would you want to put yourself in that same situation?
Do I think that Bobby Valentine would make as many infantile stupidity decisions as Derek Shelton? No, I don't. Do I think he's a great coach? Nope. But I think he knows how to teach kids. And I think he's done it before. And I think that I'd be more willing to let him do it for a year or two than to keep watching some guy struggle in his third year, still not knowing like the basics of what managers do.
I worry that if they did it now, that it would send a message that you're going to get treated that same way coming in if they got rid of him at this point.
I think it would send a message that not good enough is not good enough. And that's a message I want them to send. I'd like them to send it and have it reverberate through the system that not good enough is not good enough.
I think I'd rather target someone that I think has had more of a say in the actual development of guys, and maybe not the guy who has to cook the dinner with someone else's scraps. I would go there first, and I'm not defending Derek Shelton. I'm just saying, like, I would head that way first before I move to Derek Shelton. And I know people may disagree with that. I think you are. I just would.
It's not so much that I'm disagreeing with it. It's that I hate the premise of who's going to come in here and take this. There's only 30 of these freaking jobs. Somebody will take it. Somebody good will take it.
Man, someone will take it. That's for sure.
Someone good will take it. There's only 30 of these jobs, Jim.
I understand.
There are at least 50 excellent minor league managers that want a shot at the majors or had a brief shot at the majors and got bumped back down. There's Ron Washington types out there. They can get a good manager. I just hate that premise. That's the only thing I'm railing on. And I'm not even 100% convinced they should move on from Shelton.
Yeah.
I just don't like that argument.
Well, I think mine is that I don't know that anyone would want to get themselves in that situation if they weren't entirely sure. So then you would be going with someone, again, who maybe is a little more unproven. I'm not saying they could be bad. I'm just saying it cuts down who you can get when you're getting rid of a guy a year earlier than he was even supposed to be here, when you gave him pretty much nothing to begin with. And not that he hasn't earned his criticism on part of it. So
yeah, I get it, but it sounds to me the same exact argument as sign a better free agent pitcher. Well, none of those free agent pitchers want to come here. But you know what? At some point, it has to start. You got to do it.
well,
You
yeah,
have to be able to do it. And if you got to spend more money, do it. You got to do it. And that's the point. I mean, we want to keep giving them excuses and ways out. And, I don't want to do that anymore. They need to step up and do things. Like, they need to go out and actively sign better players as opposed to, nobody wanted to come play here. Well, nobody wants to come play here because of the way you don't sign anybody.
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with people that say that on that side of things.
Yeah, it's
I
chicken
just
and
don't
the
think.
egg on all this stuff.
Yeah, I just don't think anybody wants to be the next Derek Shelton, the next Lloyd McClendon. Those kind of guys that just kind of get cycled through and then don't ever really get a shot again. And this is the job they took. You'd have to get a guy with some. You'd either have to go back to like the Clint Hurdle type guy or a young, dynamic guy. Those would be the directions I think you'd have to go, and then you'd have to pay to do it.
And they tried young, dynamic with Lloyd McClendon, and it didn't work. And they got probably in your mind, based on what you said, unhireable coach Clint Hurdle, who had taken his team to a championship and failed, and somehow took this job that nobody would possibly want because they sucked so bad and wanted to reconnect the city with the team. It could be done, is the point. It
can.
If Derek Shelton doesn't deserve this job, Derek Shelton doesn't deserve this job. That's the point. I'm not sure we're there yet, but the evidence is mounting.
Sure. And let me pose this question to you. You think does it matter from a wins and losses perspective how this goes the rest of the way with 30-some games left on the schedule? Can it get so untenable in that regard that it forces things, or do you think these 30-some games are not really going to be that big of a factor in it? Because I go back and forth with that a little bit. Like, I think if the bottom fell out, like horrifically, then I'm probably willing to have that conversation a little bit more.
I'd say be willing to have that conversation because the bottom ain't going to fall much more than it just has. This has been the worst stretch of the entire season after the All-Star break. The wheels have officially fallen off. Now, whether they recollect themselves and like regroup and finish strong, I mean, I guess if they finish strong, it could change some opinions, but they're not going to do enough to change those hitting numbers.
No. That's why I mentioned wins and losses, because the other stuff's almost set in stone now.
I guess for me, I mean, fans being unreasonable is kind of their job, right?
Sure.
And that's not what this is, though. This is a franchise that has openly decided that those who don't see the vision are simply not seeing things the right way. You know, you can tell this is the case when you see quotes that start with like, well, you have to understand. Or, that's not how we measure X, Y, and Z, right?
Right.
Nothing in the world could be more disingenuous than trying to blame fans for not getting what you're trying to do. 90% of fans don't care about anything but wins and losses. Yeah. If you want to sell to them, you better start talking to what their singular focus is, which is when can we expect wins and losses? If you're selling to the 10% that are paying attention and actually care that somebody individually got better, well, they don't want to hear those platitudes either. at some point, people want to see wins and losses. So does it matter this year? Technically, no. But I sure would love to see them avoid 100 losses. Now, does it matter if they got 99 instead? No.
And we talk about optics so many times, and I don't know. I think there is something to be said to avoid that 3-digit mark. That
Right.
100 looks a lot uglier, and I think that's what bothers me a little bit too about how they've gone about this. Is I think Alex Stump put out there about them how many double-digit losses they've had in the last 2 years, and them just kind of like, which is the most there's been in baseball in like 70 years, back to back, 10 or 12 double-digit losses, and it's just like the trampling of like the organizational legacy bothers me, that they're so cavalier about that. That actually really kind of bothers me.
I mean, you're hitting on something else I wanted to bring up, and
okay.
I think it's the overall lack of urgency that drives me nuts.
Yeah.
There's no urgency to actually tangibly improve on the field at the major league level. This is a general manager that came from Boston and Toronto. It's not as though those fans are more patient than Pittsburgh fans. It's not like anything that happened there didn't happen here. Our fans have just been beaten down a little more. Maybe they're a little quieter. But that doesn't mean that we don't know what we're looking at.
Yeah.
Where's our third rounder that breaks through and comes up here and takes over the league at 22 years old?
It's funny. Yeah, I mean, I was just talking to DK and he mentioned about Michael Harris,
right,
with the Braves. I mean, this is a guy that jumped straight from Double-A, third rounder. He's a man already, and he rakes. I mean, he
does. So, he's unbelievable. The Pirates had Jack Sawinski up here, and we all know he had problems as far as strikeouts go. But 14 home runs is 14 home runs.
Yeah.
Other teams don't send that down to AAA.
Right.
Other teams try to work with him up here to make him better.
Well, too, yeah, and the funny thing about that is like they've been so careful about other guys about not letting them face lefties, and they were just didn't care about doing that to Jack Sawinski. Where you could have helped him a little bit
when he was up here too. What choice did they have? They were all lefties.
Well, yeah, and teams aren't stupid. I mean, they'll throw as many lefties. They'll throw as many lefties as they have against you in series if all you have is lefties. So I really do hate how, and I don't know if it's because in baseball things are so long ago they hope people forget, but I don't want to see the Pirates start reaching all these dubious milestones in their franchise history because they think nobody remembers 1950.
Right.
It's disappointing. When all you pimp out is your legacy anyway, when you go to a game, it's all Roberto Clemente, and it's all like when they do their hype video.
Yeah.
But then you'll allow this to go on the field. I just feel like, man, that's disheartening to me. I hate that part of it, Gary.
I'd be a lot more excited about this Pirates Hall of Fame if I felt like there was any worthy current players that might factor into that at some point. There's not.
Yeah, they better pace themselves.
Sure. I mean, but we're talking about like, it's not just the losses. We talk about the win-loss number. Yeah, the win-loss number sucks. But, Jim, this is a team that has now lost 7 double-digit games this year. They've allowed 10 or more runs in 11 contests.
Yeah.
What the funny thing is, the pitching staff has actually not been the main issue.
Which is surprising a little bit.
But to have losses like that, the offense does nothing. Just does nothing. I'm sorry. You can't sell me that you've got Brian Hayes, Brian Reynolds, O'Neal Cruz. You name off some. You want to see more of some of these guys individually. If I went through and named that roster, most fans would say they want to see more of 10 of those guys.
Right.
That to me is damning that the offense is putting up the numbers it is.
Yeah, I mean, they go games where, there was 2 out of the past 3 games. They had 1 hit through 7 innings, 2 hits through 7 innings.
Yep.
And you're playing teams like, you look at the Atlanta Braves, and Gary, I was at the one game, at the one where they lost 6-1. My neck was hurting looking up at the scoreboard and googly eyeing these numbers of all the Braves hitters. I was just so jealous. Like every guy they brought up to the plate, I'm looking up and I'm looking at all their numbers, and I'm like, every one of them. Their DH has 17 home runs, and they've got Michael Harris, and they've got Acuna, and they're missing Ozzy Alves right now. Like there's
Marcelo Zuna, or like imagine if the Pirates lost an Ozzy Albies and a Marcelo Zuna in a season, in any season that you can think of, all the way back to 1987. If you go as far back as you like. Imagine the Pirates losing that much talent in one season and still winning. The Braves lost Acuna last year and still won the World Series. That's how good they've developed and how well they've scouted and how wonderfully constructed that team is. That's how you do it.
And that's what's so crazy about and I think we're going to actually get to this in the next topic is like when you start, people love to, look at those rankings either individually or as a farm system. You start comparing that stuff to what teams like the Braves are doing. And let's be honest, they're in a better position than the Pirates, financially, but they're not the Dodgers, from that.
And they didn't buy this team either.
That's what I'm saying. So like, how in the world are we going to get to that? Anytime soon.
They won't. That's the thing. And that's what sucks, because even if they do everything right, it still takes some money. It still takes probably more than they're going to spend. And when Freddie Freeman walks away, you got to be willing to pull the trigger on a trade. And, imagine like the trade they pulled off to get Matt Olson and still have Michael Harris hanging out there to bring up.
Right.
Think about that.
It's so like, I just respect it so much because
I respect the hell out of it. And I'll be honest, I follow the Braves pretty closely because I got some friends down there and whatnot. And I love what they've done in the organization. So I love to look at the way other teams build. Michael Harris is not a name that the fan base has been biting their nails waiting for.
Yeah. No, he was a bit of a surprise how he came on.
Yeah. So the Pirates get somebody like, say, a Matt Gorski this year. He's crushing it. And they promote him to Double-A, and he's still crushing it. There was no chance that kid was coming up here this year.
No.
That's another thing that the Pirates need to consider changing. When a kid's crushing it, let him come up here and play. Like, you ain't got nothing better stopping him. As long as they're going to play the Super 2 game and we got to get an extra year control game, never going to win. Never, ever going to get these guys up here quick enough to affect any kind of change. You're never going to get Luis Robert if you do that. You know what I mean?
No, I totally get it because, I'm sitting here looking at and it's funny because I see him and we've talked about Matt Frazier last year, and he had such a good year.
Yeah, really struggling this year though.
Really struggling, but I think he was a third rounder. And let me make sure about that before I go any further, because I just think that, and we talked about maybe he's that guy that they got to get lucky a little bit too. Like they got to so those Michael Harrises are hard to find, but it's sure nice when you can find one. Matt Frazier, you talk about, hey, maybe something like that can happen to the Pirates. Having a really rough year. Yeah, hitting 219, 636 OPS. It's tough, man.
Let's take a quick break. When we come back, and honestly, we need to catch our breath too, I think.
I'll hydrate.
I was getting very passionate there. But let's take a quick break. We come back. I want to talk a little bit more about the development system and, really where we see it right now,
Oh, definitely.
We're back to the Pirates Fan Forum here on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcast Network, and Jim and I have had a chance to calm down a little bit, at least partially, but it's time to start talking about the development system, because we can't sit here and talk about the coaching staff without talking about how the players are getting here in the first place, right? We just said, where's our third rounder that comes up at 22, right? And he's ready to rock, and he just comes up here and takes the league by storm. Where's our surprise prospect? We sit here pining for all these first rounders. It's almost as though the other rounds don't produce any players. It's crazy, isn't it? It seems insane to me that everyone else gets third rounders coming up. We do have players like Michael Burrows. I think he was a 9th rounder or something, and he's on the cusp probably. But for the most part, the people that we actually pay attention to are the number 1 picks. And everybody's losing their mind because Baseball America reordered their top 100 list. And, oh my God, imagine that all of the new number 1 picks ended up in the top 100. It's so crazy that it would move guys down. Let's just ignore that O'Neal Cruz graduated and Rowanzi graduated. And Pirates only have 1 top 50 player. Oh, woe is me. Those lists don't mean shit.
Yeah, they can be, and it really depends. Like I think what you're saying is when you check in on those lists. Like right now, there's been some movement. Because of like Tamar Johnson's 30. The guy that a lot of Pirate fans wanted, Elijah Green, he's 29. So these guys they're the shiny new toys, and they get slid right in the top 30 usually.
And if Tamar Johnson pulls his hamstring next year and misses 25 games, watch Baseball America drop him to 69. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, we were just talking about this too. Henry Davis got dropped. Poor guy has been. He's been hit so many times, I don't want to let him step out on a street anywhere.
He just got hit in his rehab start for Bradenton the other day as a DH. They got him DHing so he doesn't get hurt, and he still gets hit.
Yeah, I mean, Nick Gonzalez has had that weird heel thing going on.
Quinn Priester's been hurt.
Priester's been. I mean, these are some big, look, the Pirates create enough of their own problems, but those are 3 guys right there that have truthfully they've gotten pushed down on these lists, and it's also really hurt on the actual real baseball spikes in the dirt way, which is it pushes things back even further.
Sure. And their top performer in the minors this year, to me, far and away, has been Andy Rodriguez. He's been unbelievable. You were talking earlier in an earlier episode about thinking that Henry Davis probably should have a shot in spring. I bet I could twist your arm ever so slightly and have you believe that that's Endy now. I think he should probably get a shot this spring, right? Now, if we really want players to make that jump when they're ready and they're showing you they're ready, that shouldn't be a dream that Endy Rodriguez has a shot in spring next year. That should be, if Endy Rodriguez is the best catcher in spring training Andy Rodriguez goes north with the team and catches from day one, and they don't worry about Super 2 or getting an extra year arbitration because they offer him a contract extension early on to make sure that that doesn't matter. That's how successful teams get talent, retain talent, and build a team. So if the Pirates really want to emulate teams that do that sort of thing, even the Rays do that, that's what they should do. Because this constant dance back and forth, making sure that you're worried about service time and doing there is no winning there. It's hard enough to line players up without that shit. You add like that in, in, no way.
I know. It's so baseball's hard enough as it is.
Yeah.
And finding guys and developing them and to add that into the equation as if you really have a lot of control over that, or spending time on that when you really just need to be focusing on some basic things. Boy, that's cart before the horse stuff sometimes, right?
It really is.
Especially for the Pirates.
At some point, you have to believe in what you have cultivated. And you have to bring them up here, and you have to make sure they're going to be here for a while. As soon as you get to like year 2 or 3 with some of these guys, they become unsignable. The Braves have everybody locked up at $180 million for a reason. And it's because they lock up guys like Albies before he becomes a $400 million player. That's the kind of stuff you have to do.
Yeah, and you're letting all those guys get paid now and then still have a chance to cash in when they have another contract coming up too because of their ages, right? So it's so. And by the way, this is nothing that like you remember those Cleveland Indian teams of the 90s were doing when they were getting all of that talent and then they were signing it. And they were with Manny Ramirez and Carlos Baerga, and like they had all those guys. So like, this is nothing new. The Braves are just doing it again and doing it better, I think. So
right, and have more resources to begin with.
Right. Oh, geez.
With the development system, when we look at it, what's missing? Because we're not seeing players come up here with the polish that I think you need to see. And as many times as this team loves to tell us that development doesn't stop at the major league level, we just went through this coaching staff. Mm-hmm. It friggin' stops. There is nobody teaching them anything once they get here that's worth being taught anyway.
No.
What's the last player you saw get to the majors and look better than he did in the minors? I mean, like,
no, I agree. But sometimes that comes down to the kind of caliber of player that you're dealing with too. So, here's one of the bigger questions I have about all this too is, the Pirates, they certainly aren't putting it into the major league payroll, and they love to say, well, we're pouring a lot of this into scouting and development and things that you can't see and so on and so forth. Shouldn't we have the best scouting and the best development in all of baseball?
Have you heard this group say that? I haven't. That's why I'm asking.
Well, no, but I'm just saying that I'm assuming that's if you ask them, they would say the same thing about where does the money go?
I specifically heard Huntington and Coonley say that. I have not heard that with this group.
No, they haven't. I'm just making the assumption is that they would say that they're pouring a lot of their resources into that.
Sure. I mean, I know they did add some, additional equipment, Rapsodo machines and whatnot up and down the minors. But when it comes to like real coaching, I have some questions development wise. I don't understand why we haven't seen all of last year's draft picks play yet in the system. I don't understand why we haven't seen all of this year's play yet in the system.
Well, we haven't even got to see Travis Swaggerty at the major league level
You're
when
absolutely right.
he should
But
be getting some kind of a look before this season's over with.
you're absolutely right. But like to me, it starts all the way down there. If we're going to slow walk them at just getting their foot in the door of professional baseball, not expecting them to fly the rest of the way. You know, Matt Gorski was 24 and they started him in single A this year.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, now I get it because he didn't play a lot of baseball, but it shouldn't have taken them half a season to figure out he was ready to move up to double A. You know,
I agree.
they finally move him up and he's still doing well, and then he gets the injury. The injury is not on them, but he could have been in double A weeks before that. And he probably at 24, by all rights, should have spent July in AAA.
They seem to
You
be a
want to
bit.
move a guy like that.
I mean, Endy. We're talking about Endy and how promising he looks. I mean, they did the same thing with him.
Yep.
There's definitely been this like slow-footedness to them of with the prospects, and I don't know if that's partly because of what they're seeing at the major league level, and they're like, as much as they're buying time at the major league level, are they doing that with minor league guys? I don't know. It's not the way I would handle it.
It's not the way I would handle it either, because if nothing else, they're better players, maybe.
Right.
And isn't that the goal? I mean,
Right.
even if you get them up here and it's too late, like, or say Matt Gorski comes up here, he's 25 years old when he makes his major league debut, and he hits 15, 20 home runs. Doesn't he become like a valuable chip that you can move when he's like 30? Like, it
You
doesn't
would hope
matter if he
so.
fits this core. It matters if he can help this team. That's all. Like, I look at a player like Ji-Hwan Bae. We're all talking about Travis Swaggerty. Ji-Hwan Bae got injured. Okay, he had the oblique injury, but he wasn't getting called up. They have refused to call him up all year. And
Yeah.
he's outperformed just about everybody that has played AAA this year. Cal
Right.
Mitchell, add anybody in there you want. Cal Mitchell, Kane Smith-Jigba. Pick a AAA player. Ji-Hwan Bae has outperformed them. Why isn't he up here? Like, there's no purpose in keeping him in AAA right now. None. Why not find out what this kid can do? He outperformed Marcano, if you really want to be honest about it, and I like Marcano.
hmm No, I think you're right. He has.
So that's the kind of stuff that, to me, yeah, I'm not sitting there in the locker room. I don't know what's not being said or seen. Maybe Ji-Hwan Bae is such a nice guy that pitchers are piping them to him in every at bat just because they like him, and I'm not seeing it.
He's getting the Albert Pujols treatment in the minors.
Yeah, my point is, like, here's a kid that I think has shown he's got some pedigree. He was a highly touted prospect internationally. I mean, if nothing else, the Braves wanted him before the Pirates got him. So,
Yeah. Right.
If nothing else, I trust their scouts. He's playing really well. Why is he not up here? And I don't even mean, this isn't even a Van Meter conversation, but why is that kid with a DH in play not up here?
I don't know,
The
Gary.
offense stinks out loud.
Right. That's the thing too. Is like you've got 30 some games left. To me, it's a shame with Bay and Swaggerty, and heck, even Cal Mitchell at this point. Like I don't want to be going into next year with some of the same questions. I thought that was what last year and this year were for.
I don't want to go into next year I don't want to go into December wondering if they're going to put Bay on their 40-man.
Right.
I mean, like,
before we even get to playing.
Yeah, and that's the kind of stuff that you would think they would have been trying like hell to get answered. You're right. They're not answering questions. But even when the development team does provide, as I think they have, I think Ji-Hwan Bae, I think Travis Swaggerty to a degree, and I think probably Gorski before he got hurt. we're three
He's
players.
another guy that got hurt.
There are three players they've provided who probably could have come up here and had a little bit of impact at some point. And we didn't get to see a single one of them. I don't understand it.
And
Still
like we've talked about,
the Swaggerty thing.
No. They give him 9 at-bats, and we've never heard from him again.
The only thing that
bizarre.
I can say, and it's rumors and innuendo, I have not been able to get this confirmed, but I have heard it from a few sources. I just have not been able to get it confirmed. There is a little bit of a hush-hush, whisper that maybe Travis Swaggerty wanted to stay down because of his wife's illness.
Yeah,
but
that's...
I don't know that I buy that.
Right.
This is what this kid has been working his entire life for. You want to be a major league player. You don't want to be a AAA. And wouldn't a little more money help his family? I think so.
Yeah, it's not that simple. But hey, I mean, life does happen. I don't know.
I don't know either, but I kind of don't buy it. I think they'd be screaming it from the rooftops, if only so that they didn't seem like assholes if they did something nice like that.
You mean the Pirates?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I suspect we may see them do a little bit of what they did last year, is when they called up Cruz, and then they called up Rowanzi for those little tastes. We might see that with Burrows. Maybe we will see it, but I don't want just that. I would rather let them play a little bit too.
I'm not sure what the point of that would be. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, we did that last year, and I could see that last year. Now I want to see, if you're going to do it now, and let's see what happens.
And Major League Baseball changing September call-ups too, to only 2 players instead of like opening up your entire 40-man.
Mm-hmm.
It's changed things for a rebuilding team.
That's a good point.
You used to really be able to use that last month of the season to really get eyes on some players, and hey, that's how Kevin Newman came up here, and he bombed out in 18 so badly that they felt they had to go get Eric Gonzalez to play shortstop, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, well, that's when you kind of find out how they're going to play at the major league level. And you remember, we used to even question well, they're facing other people's AAA call-ups too, so let's not get too crazy if they do well. You lose that now. You only get 2 players. One of them is probably a pitcher, just to thicken your bullpen up a little bit. And
sure.
One of them's maybe another bench guy. But you're not bringing up a highly touted prospect.
No, it does change things. With only 2 of those, and like you said, for me, first thing I think of is they probably want to just get some pitcher up here to eat some innings. Yep. I just saw the other day where Will Crow has, I think he leads
the entire league in
relievers in innings pitched.
Yep.
That's something that I would want to back off on.
Well, just last year he led the team in innings pitched.
Yeah. And now he's built a little differently because of what he used to do, and I think, but don't kid yourself, that could creep up next year if you're not careful.
Absolutely.
So they probably do want to eat some innings.
Yeah, there's just questions I have. Like, even Johan Oviedo, you get him, you're going to convert him back into a starter. Well, he started at the beginning of the year for St. Louis, so it's not like he's been away from it for 6 months, and all of a sudden you're going to introduce this foreign element to it.
Yeah, like you hand him a baseball.
He was a starter his entire friggin' life.
Right.
Except for the last 3 months. So what is he doing in AAA right now, learning how to be a starter again? He's already up in his innings a little bit. Bring him up here.
Hey, our starters go 3 or 4 innings anyway.
I mean, that's gotten better as the years go on. And I'm actually kind of hoping that COVID is in the rear view after this year, so we don't have to listen to that bullshit anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But he's a guy that you just traded for. Everybody was upset that you made the trade. I wasn't, but people were upset that you traded away a good pitcher. Well, you supposedly got one back. Why don't you let us see? Isn't that kind of what you're supposed to do when you get talent back?
Right.
especially if it's major league level talent, which he was.
Yeah,
Let us see it.
Yeah, because he's somebody that you could bring up, let him work through those same innings.
If nothing
You know what
else,
I mean?
look
Like,
at this bullpen. We
yeah,
need freaking help.
right.
Wouldn't it be nice to put Tyler Beatty back there? He was so good out of the
I know.
bullpen.
I
Wouldn't
know.
it be nice to have him back?
Yeah.
Like,
I'm not thrilled with what they did with that whole situation
me
either, I
either, but
think.
like, and he has, it's, again, I always preface this. It is not about the player. Tyler Beatty's been fine. I don't hate the guy, and I'm not upset with his starts. He's doing the best he can, I think. Being basically told on the fly, we're going to make you a starter. You know, he didn't get any kind of stretch out.
That's what I was going to say. Like, where's his AAA
It's
stint
the
for that?
exact situation that Johan Oviedo is.
Mm-hmm.
Started at the beginning of the year, went to the bullpen, and then, hey, we're going to make you a starter again. They used to do it to Steven Brault twice a month. So, like,
Yeah.
this isn't rocket science. They're just making it so. They
Right.
filled up an entire chalkboard with calculations to figure out how to turn a pitcher back into a starter, and really all you needed was one simple equation. It's it's like, what are you doing? Stop making it so much harder than it needs to be. It's baseball.
Well, I think that's you said something earlier that I thought was really good, which was this is, it's hard to be all these things to everyone, right? You know what I'm saying? That
Yeah.
they're trying to be this jack of all trades and they're masters of nothing. And, you know, you're worried about development, and you're worried about Super 2, and you're worried about arbitration, and you're worried about, you know, slowing this guy down over here, stretching this guy out, letting him do it down here because you're worried about his service time. Like, man, can we just cover some basics? Can we, Gary?
Can we catch a ball? Can we throw? Like, when we stick somebody at second base, can we know that they're smart enough to know you can't do a backhand from in between the two bases? A 45-foot backhanded flip doesn't work to start a double play. Let's
No matter
just
how
knock
fast
that
O'Neal,
out.
no matter how fast O'Neal Cruz is going to throw that ball to first when he gets it.
Right. I mean, like, there are some just basic things that actually in 2020 I felt really strongly about. They wanted to address defense. They addressed defense. The defense became the top squad in the league. 2021, we saw it drop off a little bit. 2022, we've seen it fall off a cliff. And I just want to know why the fundamentals went away.
That's what happens, though. I think it's what we're talking about, which is when you're worried about so many different things. How about let's just get back to playing some baseball?
Let's let them just come up here and have fun and swing the bat.
Sure.
Take all of the analytics guys and tell them not to talk to the players for a couple weeks. Let the kids come up here and play baseball. See if maybe they can just figure something out just from natural instincts of playing this game for their entire lives. Step in and help them when you notice something real that crops up. don't overload them as soon as they get up here.
Yeah.
We talk about development from a lot of standpoints. I think overall the system is still strong. I don't care about the rankings. I never have. And anybody that knows me knows that I don't care about them. So I'm not just saying that because the Pirates had some guys like shuffled back. I don't care. I really don't.
I rarely talk about them because I just feel I keep an eye on them. I don't tout them ever.
Yeah. And I don't either because all they are is one person's opinion. In this case, you guys all know the person that writes them for that publication. I mean, he does his own website here in town. So it's not as though it should be a shock to you that he isn't very high on Henry Davis.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, and that I've seen you on Twitter tell me that opinion sucks. And then when Baseball America's come out, you go, well, that's it. Did you forget that he wrote it? Like, if the opinion stinks in your mind, it still stinks even though it's under a different masthead.
Yeah, good or bad, it shouldn't matter to you.
Yeah.
It's how I treat PFF in football.
I mean, there's an idiot on Twitter I saw the other day. I think Termar Johnson was like 2 for 20 after debuting. Oh, he's a bust. They should have taken Green. They got cute. Come on. 20 at bats now is all it takes to be a bust as a number 1 pick.
20 at bats. Wow.
I mean, enough.
Talk about a sample size.
The team's got problems. We don't need to make it worse. That's the point. The system is still good. I'm just a little bit concerned about how quickly they're moving players through. And as you kept saying, Jim, aptly, the things they're worried about that they don't need to be worried about right now.
Or certainly not as much.
Get the players here. Lock them down when you think you're confident. Move on.
Yeah.
That's all there is to it. Augment with free agents later. If you don't do that, this is all for naught. That's just all there is to it. And it doesn't even matter if Nutting wants to spend or not, because you'll never get there.
No, and we mentioned a little bit about some of the injuries. You know, they've got to get a little bit better luck on that side of things, and maybe this is that bump in the road on that front, and then next year they can get back on track. I agree with you. I don't think, do I think it's a top 2 or 3 farm system? No, but I'm not panicking about that aspect of it either. I still think
I never
there's
thought
enough.
It was a top 2 or 3 though. I mean, I don't feel any different. Like, I'd say it's a top 10.
That's how I was going to say.
It was going to be a top 10. Feels like a top 10.
Which is fine, by the way. You can still win with that.
As far as like, is there elite talent though? I don't know.
It's a big concern. That's a big question there. You gotta have some of that impact level talent, and I'm not sure about that either.
Yeah, and we got to end the show, but I will also warn people that impact talent sometimes looks like O'Neal Cruz when it gets here, and it's not a switch. It's not like you target their ETA, they get here, they're that good. Not all the time, unless you're the Atlanta Braves. So.
Or Julio Rodriguez, and even he struggled for the first
right, and
couple
even he
months.
struggled for the first month, right? So it is what it is. But hey, I think this was a little bit less of a depressing show than last week because, while we rightly are giving them their stripes, I think there is a path forward still. But they've got to have the brains to course correct. That's what they need to do. They did it with the pitching last year when they brought in Dewey Robinson because I think they realized that Oscar Marin couldn't get his message all the way up and down the line. Like to see them do the same sort of thing with the pitching or with the hitting. And I'd like to see them bring in some type of a new assistant onto the staff. And I do think they need to make some changes. So
hitting wise, I don't see how you can chance repeating this again next year. I hope ego doesn't get in the way. Like you said, they brought in Dewey Robinson on the pitching side. That's an acknowledgement that you need help. Maybe they'll do the same on the hitting side this year.
We've already seen Bob Nutting step in once and correct the Ben Cherington mistake with Brian Reynolds. I wouldn't roll him coming in and making another change if Ben Cherington decides he doesn't want to. So
he's got to be able to do it, Gary. He's got to be able. He's an owner that is woefully uninvolved at times.
Yes, he's much maligned, but short of spending a whole bunch of money, the best thing he could do would be to come in here and make his voice heard when things aren't happening. And if I'm him, I go in and demand that 2023 looks different.
Sometimes you
I'm
got
not
to be
saying
able to.
he has to tell him how to do it, but he better tell him he expects it.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, sometimes as an owner, as a manager, as a boss, you have to be able to say, this just isn't acceptable. We have to figure it out.
Yep. Hey, good show, man.
Yeah.
I had a good time. How do people get a hold of you, brother?
Yeah, so Twitter all the time. It's at Jim Stamm 22 or for the city _412. And you know me, always talking Steelers, Pirates, Pitt, and Penguins.
Yep. And we got
How
some
about you?
exciting guests coming up here in the future for the show. What Jim and I are really excited about. I'm not going to make any announcements yet and put pressure on people, but some pretty exciting guests we got lined up, and we're really looking forward to it. So there's that on that front. Backyard Brawls coming up here soon. I'm really excited about that. Going to be talking about that on the H2P podcast this Sunday. Make sure to check that out. And without further ado, Ben, take it away, my brother.
Yes, your butt.